Welcome to our presentation ALV and FPM on HANA, the difference. This video shows you the difference of the classical versions of an ALV, respectively an FPM application, and their re-implementation with the integrated data access. All versions select data from a view and execute an authority check. In the HANA version, this check is integrated into the select statement. In the classical version, it is done in a loop on the selected rows. The classical versions are truncated to 100,000 rows. The HANA versions operate on the complete database content, nearly 1.4 million records. So let's start in the ABAP development tool with launching the classical ALV list application and in parallel the ALV on HANA version. I have to rearrange the screen to have the results in parallel. Now I execute both selection screens. As you can see, the IDA ALV returns already the first page. You can browse through the complete database content of nearly 1.4 million records. And here we are also with the classical version truncated to 100,000 records. We sort now the classical version and group the ALV on HANA application. The classical version sorts the ABAP internal table. The ALV on HANA pushes down sorting and grouping to the database, executes these operations on all the content. Also, the action to open a group is a database operation. Equally, filtering is pushed down. Filtering in the classical version operates on the pre-selected data in the internal table. Now, I aggregate an amount in both versions. Again, the right-hand side executed on HANA, the left-hand side on the internal table. In the classical version, I have to trigger the totals and subtotals separately. ALV on HANA provides already the figures due to the formally executed grouping. When the applications are back, we will have a closer look at the totals. Basically, the result is not surprising. The totals do not match. As the classical version operates on a truncated result set, the ALV on HANA version on the complete result set. So in summary, we have seen two advantages for ALV on HANA. First, we have a better performance, especially for big result sets. Second, we do not need truncation with its disadvantages with respect to sorting and aggregation. Now we switch over to the FPM List Comparison. Again, we launch first the classical and then the IDA version of FPM application. And we arrange the screen to see the applications in parallel. The ALV on HANA version already selects data with the start of the application. But to show you that it really selects data from the database, I enter the selection criterion. The result set is bigger than the truncated list on the left using the classical FPM list, and the selection on the right is faster. All these data selections and paging I am executing now are performed on the database. May I draw your attention on the FPM page? The number of hits in the result list is displayed. In the classical versions, there are 100,000 rows. In the FPM on HANA version, nearly 1.4 million rows. But back again to our comparison. On both sides, I group the data. Unfortunately, the default behavior is different for both versions, and I have to close the groups on the left side. You can see that the data selection is spread over different groups. We have the same airlines on the left as on the right. This could be different due to the truncation parameter on the left. Even if the following actions could have been triggered by the left mouse click on the column headers, I'll use the settings dialog for both versions now. I want to achieve the following scenario. I already grouped the data. Now I want to filter for euros, just as I did in the previous ALV version, and aggregate the amount. For FPM and ALV, both versions support the features on mouse click and in the settings dialog, so you do not lose the comfort of the tools in the HANA version. Back to the comparison. Again, you will feel the difference with respect to performance, and you see the different calculated totals. Again, not surprising due to the truncation. Just to mention the difference, the overall totals, left-hand side, 55 million, right-hand side, 430 million euros. As a super user in FPM, I can use a key to display some internal data, like memory consumption, end-to-end response time, server time, and client time. Also here you can see the difference. The memory consumption in the AIDA FPM version is constantly low. The one of the classical FPM list increases with the size of the selected data. But also the performance is better in the FPM on HANA version. I start in both versions the selection again to be clear what is measured. Data selection, grouping, filtering, and aggregation. As the font size for the figures is really small, the classical version consumes 106 MB memory versus 13 MB memory for the ALV in HANA. With this last glimpse on the figures, I am done with the FPM part. As we have seen, there are three major differences if we have to handle mass data in an application: performance, memory consumption, and truncation, with the negative impact on sorting and aggregation. These differences are based on a fundamentally different approach. In an UI application, you represent data on the UI which is normally stored on the database. If you are in the context of a three-layer architecture, you copy all the data you may need for the application into an internal table on the application server, much more than what is needed for the actual UI page. Only a very small part is copied to the UI layer. All data-centric operations like paging, sorting and grouping, aggregation and authority checks are executed on the application layer. ALV or FPM on HANA work differently. Only the data needed for the actual UI page is copied to the application server and the UI. All data-centric operations, paging, sorting, grouping, aggregation and authorization checks are pushed down to the database. So independent from the size of the result set, the performance is constantly fast and the memory consumption is constantly low. This conservative usage of resources allows us to get rid of the truncation. Now we are at the end of this presentation. I thank you for your interest, and I want to draw your attention on one of the following videos showing the transformation of a classical ALV application into an application with either ALV or the FPM version.